First, I'll go over the TermWeb setup I have. So it's the basic. It's not special in any way. It's a basic TermWeb setup. And then I'll go into details about what is required in WorldServer to get the connection or get the synchronization process to work. But let's start by logging into TermWeb and have a look at what we have there. So I've created a database here called UriDemo. And right now it doesn't have anything in it, but let's have a look to see how it's been configured. We have a dictionary that has a number of languages. So I've defined 3 languages in this particular term base, Dutch, French, and English. And we have a number of concept level and term level fields. These are all standard TBX fields that have not been modified. So I've just accepted the fields that existed or that you can pick from in the TermWeb configuration. So I just selected the fields, and in the demo I have here, I've selected all the fields that the integration supports. So basically you need to have those fields defined in your dictionary in order for the integration to work, even though you might not be using all of them, so you don't have to necessarily populate all of them. They need to be defined in your dictionary in order for the integration to work. So that's concept level fields and term level fields. I don't think we need to go into every one of them. We can talk about them later in case there's any questions. But that's the basic setup of my TermWeb dictionary. So that's the first part that you need to take care of. And the second element are the sections. Sections are very important for the integration in the sense that they will define or from within WorldServer you can define which sections you want to look at, so which sections you want to sync with, and also we'll need a dedicated section for WorldServer to write terms to. So we'll be syncing from TermWeb to WorldServer, and we'll be able to identify one or more sections or configure one or more sections that we want to sync with. And the other way around, we'll also be syncing from WorldServer to TermWeb, and that's a kind of a little bit of special synchronization, because the idea is that TermWeb will be the main point of managing terminology. So everything approving a term approval, the whole term approval process will take place in TermWeb, but still users that are working in TermWeb in WorldServer, sorry, will be able to suggest terms that they come across in the translation, during translation, and those terms we can push them to TermWeb to a dedicated section that's typically called proposals or something of that sort. So the people managing the terminology in TermWeb can look at those terms, can go through them, and can assign the appropriate metadata to it. So that's something important. So in addition to just creating the dictionary, you also need to create a section. You'll always have one section in a dictionary. As soon as you create it, you have a dictionary with the same, or a section with the same name. But you will have to at least create one additional section, and I've called it proposals here, that the proposals coming from WorldServer will be written to. But more about that when we look at the integration or the configuration on the WorldServer side. But that's basically it as far as TermWeb is concerned. Create a dictionary, create a dedicated section for receiving term proposals from WorldServer. So let me now switch to WorldServer, and we'll go over what you need in WorldServer in order for the integration to work. So let me start by creating a new tab. So first thing you'll need to do, obviously, is to create a term database in WorldServer. So if you're familiar with WorldServer, I'm sure that you know how to do this. You would need to go to Linguistic Tool Setup, Term Database Setup, and then create a database. So it's very simple in WorldServer. I've created a term database UriDemo. You just add a term database, you provide a name, and that's it basically. So there's nothing specific about that. So first thing, create a term database. Second thing is to create your locales. Typically, if you're working in WorldServer, those will already have been set up. So if that's the case, then there's nothing you need to do as far as that's concerned. But if not, then you will have to create your locales in WorldServer. So for locales, you can choose between region independent locales, like I have English here, for instance, without any regional classifier, or you can have locales that consist of the language and then a region where that language is spoken. So that's something that you also need to configure up front. Next thing that you need to do is create attributes. So when you're creating a term database in WorldServer, you're just creating an empty container. So you don't specify the metadata right away the way you do when you're creating a TermWeb dictionary. In WorldServer, what you need to do is create these attributes separately. So just in the same way that we selected metadata or concept level and term level fields when we were creating the TermWeb dictionary, we need to create attributes on term entry level, it's called in WorldServer, and term level to match the attributes or the metadata that we specified in our TermWeb dictionary. So you do that by going to customization, selecting attributes, and there you basically define the same attributes than the ones that we selected in TermWeb. So in TermWeb it's a little bit easier in the sense that it's all pre-configured and you just need to select what's there. In WorldServer you basically create them from scratch. So I would click add here and then specify whether I'm creating an attribute for a TD entry or for a TD term. So entry corresponds to a concept in TermWeb and term obviously corresponds to a term. So for instance, I have a definition on concept level, so then I would select TD entry and then definition. I would provide a name and then I would also tell WorldServer this is not going to be an attachment kind of field, but this will be a text area where I can enter my definition. So you would go through that, creating the same values or fields that exist in our TermWeb dictionary definition. So you can see them listed here. It's basically the same things. It's definition, source. There's two special ones. So most of them correspond to the fields that we selected when we're creating the TermWeb dictionary. There's two special ones that are also needed but that do not exist explicitly in your TermWeb database definition or dictionary definition. And that's TermWeb section. This is just a field that was added to show in WorldServer which TermWeb section this information is coming from. So you'll need to create that one separately as a text field so WorldServer can populate it. And there's also a from TermWeb, which is a Boolean field that just indicates that a term is coming from TermWeb. So the synchronization, as I explained earlier on, will typically go from TermWeb to WorldServer in most cases because TermWeb is our main terminology management system. So whatever term is synced from TermWeb will get this check mark from TermWeb, so the WorldServer user can see that this is a term that has come from TermWeb. So that's it. So we've created a term database, we've created locales, we've created attributes. The next thing we would need to create is a mount. A mount is basically a connection to a file system in WorldServer where you can store files. And we need this for storing a property file that will hold the connection details for the integration. So the URL or the web service endpoint, the TermWeb web service endpoint, and the credentials that are used for connecting to TermWeb. So we store that information in a mount, and a mount, like I said, is basically a connection to a file system. So you would go to asset interface, asset interface system, the AIS, and you create a mount. If you already have a mount, you can also use a subfolder of an existing mount, but it's a good idea to create a separate, at least a separate directory that you can set permissions on, so not everyone can has access to that file because it contains the login and password for TermWeb. So it's a good idea to shield this off for most users. But as soon as you've configured a mount, then it will become available in the WorldServer Explorer. Let me show you. So as you can see, I have a TermWeb configuration mount here, and in there I have a simple properties file that will contain the connection details for the web service. So let me open that up. Here it is. So it just has the web service endpoint that you're pointing to and the credentials that are needed to connect to TermWeb. So that's the mount, and then last but not least, what you need to do is import the code that will actually take care of the integration, the communication between the two systems. So that's a custom component or a couple of custom components that are called business rule classes, so custom business rule classes. And that's just one zip file that you need to upload by going to management, administration, customization, and then business rule classes or clauses, and there you would simply browse for the zip file and upload it, and that will add a couple of custom business rule classes. So you can see clauses. So most of them don't have a check mark. They come with WorldServer out of the box, but we have created three new ones that you'll be needing for the integration to work. So you'll need to import those into the customization section in WorldServer. And once that's done, then basically you're ready to start configuring the integration.